Welcome! Today, we are cracking open a really powerful blueprint for dealing with, well, all the stuff life throws at us. It comes from a classic text from way back in the 4th century called the Yogacara Bhumi Sastra. And you might be surprised how relevant this ancient guide is for finding a bit of peace of mind today. Okay, let's just dive right in. It's a question we all ask ourselves at some point, right? Why are we so often stressed out or anxious or just not quite happy? Is there a real way out of that feeling? Well, this ancient text doesn't just ask the question, it actually gives a direct, structured answer. And that's what we're going to walk through together. All right, so before you can fix anything, you've got to figure out what's actually wrong. You need a clear diagnosis. And the framework for this is something called the Four Noble Truths. Our journey starts with the first two, which are all about understanding the problem itself. Now, this is really interesting. Look at how intense this metaphor is. The text doesn't want us to see our problems as just some abstract idea. No, it wants us to feel how urgent they are. It's like a disease that needs medicine, a painful boil that has to be dealt with, or an arrow stuck in you that you need to pull out. This is the first noble truth in a nutshell, really acknowledging that our troubles are real and they hurt. So this breaks down that two-step diagnosis perfectly. First, the truth of suffering is just about being honest and admitting, okay, there's a problem. Then the truth of the origin gets to the cause. And what the text tells us is that our suffering isn't random. It comes from very specific things inside our own minds, like craving and attachment. And once you know the cause, you can actually start to do something about it. So, just like a doctor who figures out what's wrong and why, the next step is talking about the cure. And that is exactly where we're going next. This is the good news part, the third noble truth, which tells us that yes, a complete and lasting cure is actually possible. And the text is super clear about this. The cure, which it calls cessation, isn't about creating some new, magical, happy state. It's actually about removing all the junk, the afflictions, to uncover the peace that was already there all along. It's a stable, totally achievable state of freedom from the very things that make us miserable. And that right there is the incredibly hopeful heart of this whole thing. Okay, so we've got a diagnosis and we know a cure exists. The big question is, how do we get there? Well, that brings us to the fourth noble truth, which is the practical, step-by-step prescription for the treatment. This is the path itself. You might have heard of the Eightfold Path, and this is a really simple and powerful way to understand it. The threefold training. You can think of it like a complete workout program for your mind. You start with a solid foundation of discipline, then you build on that with concentration, and finally, you achieve that real freedom through wisdom. So step one, discipline, is all about getting your house in order both in your actions and in your heart. This is the groundwork. When our words, our actions, and even how we make a living are all aimed at not causing harm, we create a really stable foundation for ourselves. Without this, trying to calm your mind is basically like trying to build a house on quicksand. It's just not going to work. Now, once that foundation is set, we can start the real work of training the mind. The text explains that right mindfulness, which is just being aware of what's happening right now without judging it, is the key tool. It's like an anchor that lets the mind settle down so we can develop the deep stability of right concentration. This is where we learn to stop getting yanked around by every single thought that pops into our heads. And then, finally, we get to the training in wisdom. This is the part that really pulls the problem out by the roots. Right view means finally getting this whole framework, seeing our own minds and our problems with total clarity. Then right thought and right effort are how we put that new clarity into action, using it to slice right through the causes of our suffering, day in and day out. Okay, so this all sounds like a pretty neat and tidy plan, but let's be real, we all know the path isn't a straight line. And what's great is that the Yogacara Bhumi is super practical. It talks all about the real-world obstacles that we are guaranteed to run into. So let's look at a really big obstacle, our tendency to be, well, a little bit fake. Hiding our faults and trying to project some perfect image. The text calls this deceit or crookedness, and it takes this so seriously that it lists 12 specific damaging consequences of this habit. And just look at this list. This isn't about some abstract spiritual penalty. Being deceitful makes people not trust you. It stops you from growing as a person, and get this, it causes constant mental distress and anxiety. This is basically a 1,500-year-old diagnosis of the mental damage caused by imposter syndrome. The point here is crucial. Being an honest, integrated person isn't just a nice moral idea, it's a practical requirement for finding inner peace. The text also points a huge finger at harsh speech. And think about it. When we use our words to attack someone, it's not just hurting them. We are actively stirring up anger and resentment inside our own minds. It makes us defensive, it makes us closed-minded, and it basically pollutes the very mental space we're trying so hard to clean up. In an age where firing off a nasty online comment is just a click away, this ancient warning feels, well, incredibly relevant. So, we've looked at the diagnosis, the cure, the path, and even the roadblocks. But why? Why should we even start this journey? What's the ultimate point of all this practice? This quote just nails it. This whole thing isn't about impressing anyone else or getting some prize at the end. The entire reason for doing this is internal. It's for our own self-taming, getting a handle on our reactive, chaotic minds. It's for our own self-pacification, finding a real, deep, lasting peace inside. Ultimately, it is a profound act of kindness to yourself. So, the blueprint is right here. It's a clear, logical, time-tested map that leads from suffering to freedom. The only question it leaves us with is a really personal one. Looking at this map, what is one small, manageable step, maybe in what you say or what you do, or even just what you notice, that you can take on that path today?